I saw the couple back in the dark corner, picturing a quiet evening alone, but it wasn't like that at all. They followed us, took a seat from where they could watch us, and kept their eyes on us from the moment we sat down. They might as well have been wearing signs that read, "Private detectives at work." Who were they watching? Me and my secretary, Kathy. Actually, Kathy was more of a personal assistant than a secretary, and always traveled with me when I went out of town on business. My wife's boyfriend thought Kathy was much more than that, and was trying to find out for sure. He was trying to get information he could pass on to Jean, so she could divorce me and get a large sum of money. Apparently, she hadn't explained to him why she couldn't do that. Kathy and I flew into the Dallas-Fort Worth airport that morning to attend a meeting with Milgard Industries and expected to stay overnight. I was sure I recognized the blonde in the couple watching us from the baggage claim area of the airport. Jean's boyfriend was shelling out big bucks to have us watched when we were out of town, but he didn't realize he was wasting money. As Kathy and I finished dinner, I called the waiter over and asked for the bill. Kathy got up and headed to her room, and I moved to the bar. I had a few drinks and gave my watcher something to report. I asked a couple ladies to dance and even joined one at her table for a drink. We talked for a bit, and it turned out that she was also a business traveler and was just killing time in the lounge because there was nothing worthwhile on TV. She made it clear that she wasn't here to get laid, which was fine with me because that wasn't why I was here either. I danced with her 2 more times and then headed to my room. There, I pulled a small black box out of my suitcase, turned it on, and walked around the room with it. It was a device I had gotten from a friend who owned a security company. It picked up electrical and wireless signals, a bug finder, so to speak. My room appeared to be clear, so I went to the door leading to the next room and knocked on it 3 times. 30 seconds later, the door opened, and Katie appeared on the doorstep, wearing high-heeled shoes and a smile. I didn't bother with private investigators. Kathy was registered in room 212, and I was registered in room 516. The adjoining room, 518, was rented in the name of Frank Bowers, and Mr. Bowers himself didn't exist. The fact that I lingered in the hotel lobby prevented the private investigators from following me and allowed Kathy to go up to her room, wait 15 minutes, and then go up to room 518. If anyone had followed her, they would have seen that she went to the room alone, and we were counting on the fact that once she was in the room, they wouldn't waste time on her since I still had a team on me. Katie also had one of Alan's little black boxes, and she went through her room and room 518 before I went up to my room. Why did we have to go through all these obstacles? No reason. I knew for a fact that the private investigators weren't hired by my wife, and while I assumed their employer was Jean's boyfriend, I wasn't sure. Perhaps a little industrial espionage by one of my competitors. In any case, I was of the opinion that it was better to be overinsured than sorry. Why was I so sure it wasn't my wife behind the private investigators? I guess that's the story. It started like so many other stories, by accident. I finished my breakfast, kissed Jean goodbye, and headed off to work. Jean called out to me and said, "Don't forget we're having dinner with Pat and Andy tonight, so try to get home early. I made arrangements for Mom to pick up the kids for the night." As I entered the garage, I pushed the button to activate the garage door opener mechanism, and the door opened. I got in my car, drove out of the garage and down the driveway. Once outside, I reached out and pressed the button on the remote garage door opener, but the door did not close. I pressed the button a few more times, but the door still wouldn't close, so I pulled up to the curb, got out of the car, and went back into the house. I had some 9-volt batteries in the basement, and I knew from experience that if the remote doesn't work, it's usually because of a dead battery. I walked across the garage to the door to the house, and as I opened it, I heard Jean laugh and say, "The big fool is gone. Do you have time to stop by for a minute before you have to go to work? Are we still on for dinner tonight? Good. I like sitting with you, Frank and Pat, knowing we just served them another meal. Okay, love. See you in 15. And then I heard a click as the phone receiver was tucked back into the stand. My initial impulse was to rush over to Jean and get into an altercation with him about what I had just heard, but a little voice in my head said, Hold on, Hoss. You better find out all you can before you get into her shit. I quietly closed the door, got in my car, and drove to work. I didn't have to park at the end of the block to see who was coming in 15 minutes. From what I overheard, it had to be Andy. Andy was the husband of Jean's best friend, Pat. All the way to work, I pondered the situation while the big goon worked out a plan of action. First of all, I needed to gather more information, and I knew how to get it. As soon as I got to the office, I called Alan Audette of Audette Security Services. Alan and I had grown up together, and he was the closest friend I had ever had. My father provided Alan with the money to start the company when Alan was discharged from the Army. In the Army, Alan had served in the ASA, Army Security Agency, and had learned a lot of things that he thought would be useful to him in civilian life. He told me about his ideas, and I persuaded his father to help him. When I got Alan on the phone, I told him what I had just learned and what I wanted to do, and he said, "No problem. Get her out of the house and don't let her go for about 2 hours. We're having dinner with Pat and Andy tonight. We'll probably go to Duke's Steakhouse, and it'll be at least 3 hours before we get home. I'll swing by and get the key. And Frank? I'm sorry, kid. I always thought you and Jean looked great together." I thought so too, Alan. I thought so too. My problem will be keeping myself from climbing over the table after Andy and grabbing him by the throat. There'll still be time for that, buddy. Just play it cool. Earn yourself an Oscar tonight. Yeah, I thought as I hung up the phone. Much easier said than done. I grabbed a pen and notepad and outlined a plan of action. First, I needed to get more information, and I'd already taken care of that by calling Alan. Next was to protect assets, and that included protecting my credit history. At some point, I would have to do something about the credit cards that both Jean and I were on. I would have to get another safe deposit box in my name only and move some things, like certificates of deposit, from the box that both Jean and I had access to. I wouldn't touch the checking account, but I would close the savings account and transfer the money there. We would end up splitting most of our personal assets equally, but my largest asset could not be touched. When we married, Jean had to sign an ironclad prenuptial agreement that precluded her from getting a piece of the family company. My great-grandfather founded the company and passed it on to my grandfather, who in turn passed it on to my father. The company was private and would eventually pass to me. It was the intention of my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father that the company was always to remain in the hands of the family, which is why Jean had to sign a prenuptial agreement. The third clause consisted of one word: revenge. I didn't bother to list anything in this paragraph. I had time to think about it, but it would be a draconian decision. I promised myself it would be. It would indeed be draconian. I was putting my list away when Kathy came in and reminded me that I had a lunch appointment with John Crossfire of Crossfire Manufacturing. "Do you want me to go with you?" "I think so. Take good notes. Crossfire could be a good acquisition for us." I had to admit that I liked women. I was totally loyal to Jean, but I liked looking at beautiful women, so I hired a lot of them. When Kathy showed up for her interview, she was hired as soon as she walked in the door. I didn't care if she could type or even write. She was a walking dream, and I wanted her in my office where I could look at her all day long. Fortunately, Katie could do everything, and she quickly became my right hand. After 2 years of working with me, I had no doubt that Kathy could step into my shoes and take over my job if the need arose. I smiled to myself, thinking that she could easily take Jean's place and take over her duties. Kathy was the only girl who could have tempted me to cheat on Jean, but thankfully, cooler heads prevailed. At least until now. I quickly put the thought out of my mind. Just because Jean was a whore didn't mean I had to behave the same way. I got my business done and left work a half hour early, just like Jean had asked. When I got home, I was greeted with a kiss, and Jean was already dressed and ready to go out. I thought about the fact that I was to perform at the dinner that evening, and it put me in mind of Jean's performance. She played the role of loving wife to perfection. I had no idea that she thought I was a big dumbass, and it didn't show in any way in the bedroom. Our love life was great. I didn't notice any loss of love or affection, and that brought up another thought. How many times had I followed Andy to Jean? How many times had she given me careless seconds? And would I be able to do it with her knowing what I knew now? I'd have to if I didn't want her to start thinking I might know something. I needed things to look normal until I got the information I needed. Dinner went the same way as the dozens of other times the four of us had gotten together, only this time the big dummy knew what Andy and Jean were doing. That changed things up a bit. Now I was looking for the subtle signs I knew there had to be. As usual, Jean was sitting next to me in the booth, and Pat and Andy were on the other side, with Andy sitting across from Jean. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Jean's leg shake slightly, and at the same time a smirk flashed across Andy's face. I wondered if Jean's leg was playing fetch with Andy's, or maybe it was above and in his crotch. It was something I never would have noticed if I hadn't overheard the phone conversation. After dinner, we went to the Black Hole for a drink and some dancing. Andy danced with Jean, and they were discreet, probably because Pat and I were there. I danced with Pat, and as I hugged her, I wondered if she had any idea that Andy was cheating on her. If she did, I'm willing to bet she didn't even think about the fact that it might be with her best friend. Jean and Pat have been best friends since they met in second grade, and I wondered how Jean could stab Pat in the back. It would be interesting to see what Pat would do when she found out about Jean and Andy, and she will. I'll keep an eye out for that. When I got to the office this morning, I got a call from Kathy saying that Alan had called and that he would like me to call him as soon as I got there. "We got the bonus last night," Alan said when I picked up the phone. There was a charging cell phone on the kitchen counter, and since I know you're never without yours, I assumed it was Jean's. I put a bug in it, so now her cell phone, your home phones, and her car are all under control. I need to show you where the hidden camera switch is in the master bedroom so you can have privacy when you're there. Are they checked? Of course they are, you slimy alpha male. Did you catch these? Oh yes. They're wireless, activated by motion and sound. They send a signal to the remote, which in turn sends it to the machines in my store. If something happens at your house, you'll have everything under control. Thanks, Alan. No problem, buddy. Glad I could help. If nothing earth-shattering happens, why don't we plan to have lunch every Friday so you can bring me up to speed? Will do. We'll talk later. Bye. The rest of the week flew by, and I diligently portrayed myself as a loving husband. On Friday, I met Alan for lunch. Nothing earth-shaking, buddy, he said, handing me an envelope with the evidence collected so far. Even as we speak, she's having lunch in your bedroom with that asshole. From what we've gathered, it looks like this has been going on for years. How long exactly, I have no idea, but it obviously hasn't been that long. Maybe something on the discs will work, and you'll find out how long it's been going on. On the positive side, they didn't plot your death, although they did plan a divorce for both of them. There are no specifics yet, but it sounds like they're waiting for something financial to happen. They won't get anything from me. I have an ironclad prenup that spells out the most important things. I don't know, buddy. Maybe it'll come out in the next couple weeks. They're sure they've got it all worked out, and neither you nor his wife have a clue about anything, even though you did give her a bad time during your alpha male night. When she spoke to him the next day, she told him what had happened and said she was worried that you might suspect something. He convinced her that it was all about you being an insecure husband who wanted to assert himself. Have you decided what you're going to do yet? Not yet. I need a hell of a lot of information before I make a decision. I want you to keep gathering information, but is there any way you can arrange it so I can get it without having to wait until Friday lunches? No problem. I can give you the footage from the cameras in the house, but not the information from the phone and car bugs. Do you need it at home or at the office? In the office. I don't want to risk her finding anything that will let her know I know what she's up to. Alan slid a small box toward me. These are bugs to put in her purse. If she's like most women, she has one or two favorites that she always uses. I went back to the office and, since I had a clear schedule, went down to the conference room, got the audio-visual cart, and pulled it over to my office. The cart had a large screen TV and the necessary equipment to play tapes, CDs, and DVDs. I told Kathy that I didn't want to be disturbed unless it was a catastrophic emergency and made myself comfortable to watch the discs Alan had given me. There wasn't much of interest in the phone conversations, other than Jean's concerns about my performance as the alpha male. It mostly boiled down to scheduling appointment times and exchanging phrases like, "I miss you," and "I can't wait to see you again." The visuals were uninspiring. The only thing I expected to see, but didn't, was being trashed. Hearing myself called a big dummy in an overheard conversation. From this week's batch, I learned nothing about why or when they started. The weekend passed without entertainment, as Jean, the kids, and I slept in a tent on the lake. On Monday, I was too busy to check the camera footage at the house, and on Tuesday, I went on a quick day trip that didn't allow me to check on what Jean was doing. Wednesday, I checked the camera from time to time but didn't catch anything. Andy was selling real estate and could leave his office and visit Jean whenever he wanted, and I couldn't sit at the computer all day. Thursday, I managed to catch them finishing work and getting dressed, but to find out what they talked about, I'd have to wait until Friday lunch with Alan. Jean wanted to do it Thursday night, and I concluded that she liked giving me Andy's leftovers. When I had lunch with Alan, he told me that the week had been pretty boring. They met on Tuesday, as I'd anticipated, and of course the day before. "How long do you want to keep going? You've already had enough time to burn it off." "I guess so. But I'm hoping to get some information that will give me an idea of when and why they started dating, and I'm curious as to what financial matters they're waiting on before divorcing. Let's wait a couple more weeks, and if we don't have anything by then, I'll be done with it." Jean wanted to do it that night, and I began to notice a pattern. She wanted to do it on the nights she spent the day with Andy. On Saturday, she told me she was going shopping for clothes and asked if I would mind watching the kids. I didn't mind, of course, and we had a fun day together. Jean got home around 7 with a bunch of bags and packages, so I guess she did do some shopping, but she wanted to make love that evening, and that told me she didn't spend all her time shopping. Since I'd found out about her and Andy, I hadn't made any attempt to start dancing with Jean. I was just following her lead. I wondered if she would notice it sooner or later, and if she did, if it would make her think twice. I decided I had to be the one to start now and then, so Sunday night I proposed and got, "Not tonight, honey. I've had a bad day, and I just want to lounge in the tub." That was a first. She had never turned me down before. That evening, I did what I had been putting off because, frankly, I wasn't sure I really wanted to know. After Jean and the kids fell asleep, I got out of bed and went to the kids' rooms. I carefully opened their mouths and swabbed the inside of their cheeks. The next day, I took them to the lab so DNA testing could be done and told them I would pay extra for expedited results. That evening, Jean wanted to make love, and I assumed she had been with Andy earlier. This was confirmed the next morning when I got a call from Alan. "We've got something. They met yesterday, and I think you need to see it by Friday. I'll send it to you." At 10:15, I had the disc in my hands and headed into the conference room to use the AV setup. As usual, nothing was interesting, but the conversation while they got dressed was informative. "How much longer until we can pull the plug?" Jean asked. "Nothing has changed since you last asked. Pat won't get the money in his trust fund until after he's 35, and that's 2 years away. Is there any news from your side? Frank's father isn't going to turn the company over to Frank?" "Doesn't look like it. The old fart is as healthy as a horse." "Well then, since you can't get anything out of Frank, we'll just have to wait until Pat turns 35. Why don't we just say to hell with it and do it? I'll get the kids in the divorce, and I'm sure the court will give me the house until they turn 18. I'll get a good chunk of alimony and half of our assets, and that's a lot. I'm not walking away from the chance to get half of Pat's $5 million. There's only 2 years left, 19 months actually, and we've already waited 6 years, so why 2 more? We've been lucky, and I'm just afraid that luck won't last. I want to end things on my terms, not Frank's. So cross your fingers and hope Frank's father retires in the next couple months. Under the prenup, you won't get any stake in the company, but once Frank gets control of it, his net worth will increase, and your half of the assets could double. I still think we should do it now. You worry too much, love. We'll be fine. I turned the phone off and heard, "You poor thing." I turned around and saw Katie standing there. "Sorry, boss. Didn't mean to intrude, but the door wasn't locked, and I needed to remind you about your afternoon meeting with Gilmer at Apex Products." "How long have you worked there?" "Almost since the beginning. You were looking so engrossed you probably didn't hear me come in. When I saw you watching, I should have left quietly, but I couldn't look away." "How long have you known each other?" "A lot longer than I'd like. That stays between us, doesn't it?" "You know me, boss. You know I've got your back. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet. I need some more information before I make a decision." "Anything I can do, just let me know, okay?" "Thanks, Kathy." As I pulled out the CD, the rudiments of a plan began to form in my head. There were problems with it, but if I could solve them, it could work out. A week passed, and on Thursday I stopped by the lab to see if they had the results of the DNA tests, and they did. According to the tests, the babies were mine. This changed the plan I had been working on, and the information gave me the push I needed to spring into action. I was going to attack through the back door if I succeeded. I would sink them, and they wouldn't even know I did it. The hardest part was making arrangements with Pat so Andy and Jean wouldn't find out. The only way to do that was to catch Pat alone. Fortunately, I had a way to do that. Pat was a middle manager at a company we did business with, and I would call on them from time to time. I usually stopped by Pat's office and offered to take her to lunch. I hated doing this to her, but she needed to know what kind of asshole she was married to, and she needed to know about his plan to screw her over. I arrived at Milford Manufacturing at 11:15 and talked to Marv, the purchasing agent, and then stopped by to see Pat. "Got time for lunch?" "With you?" "Anytime." We got in my car and drove off. When she saw me heading away from the restaurants, she asked where we were going, and I said it was a surprise. She looked at me confused as we pulled into my assigned parking space at work, and I told her it would be clear in a few minutes. I led her into the conference room, telling Kathy that we were not to be disturbed for any reason. I closed the door and said, "I hate to do this to you, and you may never want to talk to me again, but it has to be done." "Why wouldn't I want to talk to you again?" "They used to kill the messenger who brought bad news." "Bad news?" "The worst. Absolutely bad." I inserted the CD into the audio-visual device and pressed the play button. The screen lit up, and Pat saw Andy entertaining her best friend. She stood stunned, then said, "This is some kind of joke, isn't it?" I shook my head. "No." I removed the disc and inserted another and said, "I have 3 weeks of this garbage, and I probably wouldn't have let you know about it until I decided what I was going to do. But yesterday it happened, and I felt you needed to know so you could decide what to do." I pulled out the CD that was playing and inserted the one Alan had handed me. She looked it over and then said, "That miserable son of a bitch. That rotten, two-faced scumbag sucking bastard. And that bitch. I would die for her." And then she broke down and started sobbing. I took her in my arms and tried to comfort her even though I knew it was impossible. I had just shattered her world and I knew exactly how she felt. "This sucks, honey, and I know it. But now the question is, what are we going to do about it?" "And what are you going to do?" "I was thinking about doing nothing and just letting it go until the kids turn 18. If I divorce that cheating whore, she'll get the kids, and I'll be a part-time dad, and your asshole husband will live with them and be a big influence on their growing up. Once I heard their plan for you, I had to rethink everything. I had to let you know about it while you still had time to do something about it." "What do you mean?" "You have almost 2 years before you get the trust. I don't know what's on your mind. You may love that worthless bastard and want to fight for him for all I know. But the fact that I showed you that disc gives you enough time to divorce him before you get your money. So, like I said, you have time to do something about it. If I divorce him, then Jean will step in, and you can no longer pretend you don't know what's going on. That means you'll get divorced and lose your children. Maybe, but then again, maybe not. What does that mean? If you don't use the materials I've already gathered, Gene won't find out what I know. We can put a private investigator on Andy and use what he finds out. I know that Gene leaves the house on weekends to go shopping and that she's meeting Andy. The next time they do, the detective will come out on them and we can use his material to get to Andy. You can spit in Jean's eye and then tell her you're not going to tell me because you don't want to hurt me or the kids. That way I can hold my material until I'm ready to burn her. Of course, that might not work. She might just say, "Screw Frank, I want to get rid of him anyway." I just don't. It's bullshit. She could come running to me, confess, beg me to forgive her and tell me a bunch of lies about how she never meant to do it, and so on and so forth. If she did that, I'd probably pretend to forgive her, at least until the kids were old enough to leave home. I just don't know. It's impossible to predict what will happen. I don't know how long I would have sat around if I hadn't found out what Andy had planned for you. How did you even get onto them? I told her about the overheard phone conversation and what I did when I heard it. She shook her head in disgust and said, "I wish I knew how long this has been going on. I have one recording that says 6 years. I just want to know how long that two-faced bitch has been pretending to be my best friend while stabbing me in the back." She looked at her watch and said she had to get back to work. On the way, she told me she was going to contact a private investigator and that she would be in touch, and I told her that if I had any more information, I would make sure it got to her. For the next 3 weeks, things remained the same. On 2 weekends, Jean asked me to watch the kids while she went shopping, and on both nights, she wanted to take over. Only twice in those 3 weeks did we do it when she hadn't been with Andy earlier in the day, and both times because I insisted on it. Both times I said she really didn't want to, and both times I said, "I guess I'll have to go back into alpha male mode," and she gave in. At the end of that 3-week week, I got a call from Pat. "I have everything I need to pursue Andy. You were right. They were meeting on weekends, and while my private investigator didn't get any footage from their motel bedroom, he did get pictures of them holding hands, hugging and kissing, going in and out of motel rooms together. He did get some good shots through your living room windows, though. I'm going to see my lawyer this afternoon, and hopefully I'll get a subpoena from him in a couple days. I'll call you and let you know when. You should have some pretty interesting audio when that happens." That conversation prompted my next steps. That night at dinner, I told Jean that we needed to start looking at our finances. Because of the bad economy, the company is having to take some steps to survive. My paycheck has been cut by a little over a third, so we're going to have to start pinching pennies and watching what we spend. We're going to have to cut back on some of our spending. I talked to the bank this morning about taking out a second home loan to help us get by. I don't know how long this pay cut will last, and it may be a while before it's over. That night, for the first time since I had found out about Andy, Jean didn't want to make love, even though she had spent 3 hours with Andy during the day. 2 days passed and I got a call from Pat. It was D-Day. I asked my friend to call Andy and make an appointment to discuss the sale of her house, so at 3 o'clock he'll be there, and then he'll be served. Also at 3 I will stop by your house to pay the whore a surprise visit. I'm going to make her an offer she'd better not refuse. If she accepts it, you can hold out for a while longer. I called Alan, told him what was going on, and informed him that I would be staying late at the office and wanted him to relay to me whatever he came across after 3 calls. It was Thursday, and I could have waited until Friday afternoon, but I didn't feel like waiting. I could watch Pat's visit live, but I wanted to hear the phone conversations that would take place after Andy was served. At 3 o'clock, I sat at my computer monitor and watched Jean fiddling with cleaning around the house. The doorbell rang and she went to the door, opened it, and smiled when she saw Pat standing there. The smile disappeared when Pat slapped her so hard that Jean backed up and almost fell over. Pat walked into the house and screamed, "You worthless two-faced cunt! How can you pretend to be my best friend while having fun with my husband and not even try to deny it? I've had a private investigator on Andy for 2 weeks now, and I've taped both of your Saturday visits to the motel, as well as the 6 times he's been here. You really should close the curtains or blinds if you're going to entertain in your living room. It would prevent my detective from taking pictures. It goes without saying that you're dead to me, and when I leave here, I don't want to hear your voice or see your face anymore. By all rights, I should hang you out to dry, but apparently I think more of your husband and children than you do, so I'm going to give you one chance not to ruin your husband's and children's lives. When you talk to that worthless piece of shit I'm married to, you better convince him not to fight for the divorce. If you don't convince him and he does fight, I'll make sure Frank gets a copy of everything I have. She looked at Jean for a few seconds, then said, I still can't believe you did this to me, and turned and walked away. Jean rushed to the window and watched Pat get into her car and drive out of the driveway. There was a look of anguish on her face as it dawned on her that she had just lost her best friend, and I couldn't help but wonder at her thoughts. Of course, she couldn't have known she'd lost Pat as her best friend when she'd contacted Andy after Andy's divorce from Pat. If she was going to be upset about losing her friendship with Pat, why had she started playing around with Andy in the first place? I turned off the live feed and went back to work. If I kept watching, I would only hear her version of all the phone conversations she might have had. I would just wait until I could hear both sides. The wait didn't take long. At 4:40, Alan called and said he had something good and would send it over right away. 20 minutes later, I was already listening to Jean and her lover. Hello? It's me. We have a problem. I know. You know? Pat was here half an hour ago. She knows about us. I know. I just got served with divorce papers and a restraining order. I think you should get ready to meet Frank because I'm sure she'll tell him everything. Maybe she won't. After she hit me, she said she wouldn't tell Frank if I could convince you not to fight the divorce. How can I fight her? She's got everything cold. Pictures and everything. I don't. All I know is that she told me that if I convince you not to fight, she won't tell Frank. I'm not going to fight, especially when I know I can't win. So I guess you're safe. Since Pat told you the truth. Why would she lie? Woman scorned and all. Maybe to lull you into a false sense of security, so it'll be a big shock to you when Frank hits you with it. Either way, it changes everything. How? Now we don't have to wait for her to get her trust fund. Now we need to focus on getting you to get as much out of Frank as possible. That might not be so easy. Right now, according to Rob, we're in financial trouble. The economy is so bad that the company has cut Frank's paycheck by a third, and he's talking to the bank about refinancing the house to keep things going. What are we going to do? I don't know. I was counting on what I could get from Pat and what you could get from Frank to help us. I don't have a backup plan. I can barely take care of myself on what I make at the agency. The economy has really killed the real estate market. I guess you'll have to live with Frank until the economy improves or until I figure something out. I'll call you later. Will I see you tomorrow? I don't know. Now that I don't have Pat's income to supplement mine, I'm going to have to work a lot harder trying to get listings and sell houses. I won't be able to be free during the day like I used to be. We'll work something out. Just give me some time to figure it out. I smiled as I turned off the disc. Time for the next step. One of the things I had learned from Alan was that he had met and befriended some pretty shady individuals in his business. By shady, I meant that some of them weren't legitimate and weren't over the edge, and some of them were willing to do almost anything if the money was right. I called Alan and told him what I needed, and he said it was doable and that he would get back to me. 2 hours later, he called me back with a name and phone number. 3 hours later, in the back room of a bar on the east side of town, the deal was done, and I left the place $2,000 poorer. I called Pat on my cell phone, gave her a heads up, and headed home. When I got home, knowing that Jean hadn't seen Andy that day, I insisted on having fun and got what I usually got on days when she wasn't having fun with her lover. Not today, Frank. I've had a really bad day. You know, Jean, lately I'm getting tired of hearing that from you every time I want to get down to it. I'll tell you what. Keep it and let it grow. I don't care. I grabbed a pillow off the bed and headed to my home office to sleep on the leather couch. I'd be back in the bedroom the next night, but the fun with Jean was over. She'd have to beg me before I'd have her again. But I wasn't going to be without her. No, sir. I wasn't going to give up. The next morning on my way to work, I stopped and bought one of those alternative newspapers. You know the kind. I was going to make a list of escort services, check out a few of them, and see if I could make a deal with any of them. I was making the list when the phone rang. It was my father, and he asked me to go up to his office. I went up to the 4th floor and entered his large corner office. Myrna, his secretary, waved me in. I was surprised to find my mom in the office with him. Are you ready to try your hand at running a company? Why? What's the matter? Your mom and I decided to go on a 3-week cruise, and depending on how things go, it could be 5 or 6 weeks, or maybe longer. You were left in charge when I took a week's vacation, but that was more of a concern than managing things. This time, you'll be doing everything yourself. Make all the decisions, putting out all the fires. Do you agree? When do I start? We leave for Florida on Friday night, so everything will be in your hands when I leave the building on Friday. Okay. While you're both here, I need to bring you up to speed. I told them about Jean's situation and the fact that I had lied to her about taking a pay cut and possibly even having to take a bigger pay cut. Whenever she's around any of you, I need you to back me up on how much the economy is hurting the company. But the company is doing well. I know, but I'm trying to make her think she won't come out of the divorce with a big loss. The divorce will cost me the kids, and I don't want that. I'm going to try to keep us together until the kids are old enough to choose which parent they want to stay with, or until they're old enough to live on their own. We'll help in any way we can, my father said. I can't believe Jean would do this, my mom said. I always thought well of her. Who will be in charge of your department while you run the company? I think I'll give Kathy a chance. Do you think that's wise? She hasn't had much work. Well, the hell with her. I told you you'd be in charge, so I'm not going to interfere. When I returned to my office, Kathy followed me in. She pointed to the center of my desk and asked, "What's this?" She pointed to a page of the newspaper with ads for escort agencies and my list lying next to it. She blew you off and you're looking for a replacement for her? That's half right. I blew her off, not the other way around. Why are you looking for a professional to take her place? I have needs, and I'm not the kind of guy who hangs around bars looking for one-night stands. The solution to your problem is much closer. Oh? And what would that be? I'm sure you'll figure it out for yourself. I did, and in less than a microsecond. It took me a little longer to get up and lock the door. By the time I closed the door, Katie was lying on her back on my desk. When we straightened up, I asked, "Why?" I've been fixated on you since the day I started working for you. I wanted you so bad I could have screamed, but you were happily married, and I'm not a homewrecker. Things stayed that way with unrequited love until the day I saw the CD you were watching. Since then, I've just been waiting for my chance, waiting for a chance to make my desires known, and today, that paper on your desk gave it to me. Perhaps you should get a couch for your office, since your desk isn't very comfortable. Do you mean to say that this isn't just a one-time deal? I certainly hope not. Do you see yourself as the next Mrs. Englewood? No, at least not yet. I think we're a hell of a match, but outside of work and our interactions here, I don't know anything about you or myself. Based on what just happened, I'd say we're sexually compatible, but there's more to the relationship than that. I'm interested to see if there's more to it. Don't get your hopes up. It may take me a while to get rid of the first Mrs. Englewood, about 10 years. Right now, I'm thinking about staying married to that bitch until my kids are grown. I don't want to lose them in a divorce. 10 years? That should be enough time for us to see if we're compatible. When can we do it again? I don't think we'll want to make it a habit here at work, and I'll need to settle a few things before we can do it elsewhere. Besides, you might be too busy for us to get together again for a while. Why would that be? Because this Friday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll be taking over this department. And I went on to explain what was going to happen. Do you really think I can handle that? I wouldn't have given you a chance if I thought you couldn't handle it. If you do as well as I think you'll get a full-time job when my father finally decides to retire and I move on to a higher position. Damn, I never expected something like this to happen. Won't that piss off the people who think they should have gotten the job? Probably, but so what? They may think they should have gotten the job based on seniority or whatever, but the simple fact is that no one in the department has what it takes to do the job. If you have any problems, deal with them, and I'll support you. She was quiet for a few moments, then said, "You've never been to my apartment. Would you like to come in and see my etchings?" "You have etchings?" She just smiled, and I said, "How about we look at them tomorrow? Maybe we can leave work early so I have more time to look at them." "You got it, boss." When I got home, Jean had already made dinner, but we hardly spoke to each other. It was mostly the kids at the table talking, telling us how their day at school was going. After dinner, I helped Marianne with her homework and then spent some time in the basement workshop working with Jamie on the model aircraft carrier he was building. After the kids went to bed, I spent an hour in my home office studying some contracts I had brought home for review. When I got there, Jean was already in bed, and after pulling the covers over me, I rolled over and stood with my back to her. This must have gotten her attention because even on the nights we didn't do it, I always had my arms around her. I knew she wouldn't initiate sex because Andy hadn't stopped by her place that day. If everything went according to plan, it would be a long time before she would try to initiate sex, especially if she needed Andy to entertain her to do so. As for me, I was never going to try to initiate anything. The next day, Katie and I left work an hour early and went to her apartment. She lied to me. She didn't have the etchings, but she had time to show me some things, and those things kept me occupied until 8 o'clock, and then I had to go home. I called Jean and told her I'd be working late and not to expect me for dinner. When I got home, I played with the kids until it was time for them to go to bed, and then watched TV for about an hour before heading to bed. It was the same again as the night before. No hugging, and although I hadn't watched any live TV from home that day, it was obvious that Andy hadn't come over as Jean made no attempt to start anything. At 10 the next morning, I got a call from Pat. "Thank you, Frank. I'm relieved of my heart." "Of course, I have no idea what you're talking about, but you're always welcome." "Give me a call. Maybe we can have dinner some night." "I'd love to. I'll be in touch." Alan called half an hour later and said simply, "It's all set." "I know. I just got a call from his wife." "She probably got a call from the hospital." "I'd like to ask, but I think I'll wait until I hear about it through normal channels. I don't want to appear to know too much and too soon." "Nonsense. It may take a few weeks. Looks like he got mugged and decided to put up a fight. Bad move on his part. 2 shattered knees, a broken elbow, a broken nose, and a couple missing teeth. And from what I hear, whoever mugged him hit him in the crotch so hard he's probably going to lose at least 1 testicle." "Oh dear, that's a shame." "Yeah, right." When I got home that evening, at dinner, I said, "I talked to Pat today." Jean's face lost some of its color, and I continued. "I stopped by Milford to talk to the purchasing agent, and while I was there, I took Pat out to dinner. I also asked her if she and Andy wanted to come over for a barbecue on Sunday. Why didn't you tell me she kicked him out?" She was silent for a moment, then said, "I thought I did tell you. I must have been doing something else and missed it. I can't believe it. Why would Andy cheat on a woman like Pat? She's smart, witty, and good-looking. I'd be interested to see what he thinks could be better." Anyway, I invited her over and told her we'd cheer her up, but she declined. Strange. She has never, at least in my memory, declined our invitations. She must be in a very bad way if she did that. Did she give you any clue as to who the other woman was? No. She was too upset to talk about it. Oh well, it will come out sooner or later. After dinner, I played Monopoly with the kids until it was time for them to go to bed, and then I read for a while before heading to bed. I was already in bed when Jean joined me and snuggled up next to me. I rolled off to the side and turned my back to her, muttering good night. In the morning, I told Jean that Eldridge from TPM would be in town for contract negotiations, and I'd probably take him out to lunch so he wouldn't be looking for me late. There was no Eldridge, of course, and I invited Kathy to dinner. Then we had dessert, lots of dessert, at her apartment. It was Friday. I met Alan for lunch, and he gave me one CD. There's not much on it. A dozen phone calls from home and her cell phone to that asshole? She wanted to know when he was coming over, and he kept putting it off. The last 2 days she couldn't reach him at all, and of course we know why. She called the real estate office half a dozen times, and all she was told was that he wasn't home. She's tried calling his cell phone, but of course he doesn't answer. Now she knows why. I told her at breakfast that I heard he was in the hospital and hurt really bad. I told her that Pat must have gotten to the husband of the woman Andy was having fun with, and the woman's husband started stalking Andy. I guess that's mostly true. He grinned and said, "The husband was behind it." We both laughed, and Alan asked, "So what now?" "That's up to Jean. I'm not going to let her know what I know. I'm going to live with that bitch until the kids turn 18, and then I'll kick her out." Of course, she might have other ideas. She was so unhappy with me that she got involved with Andy, so she might just get it over with. If she does, I'll threaten to let everyone in the world see the audio and videotapes we've collected if she doesn't agree to my divorce terms. I have no idea how events will unfold. All that remains is to wait and see. All I can do is wish you luck, buddy. Should I put the equipment away? No. Leave it where it is. I still want to know what she's up to. Just let me know if anything interesting comes up. Otherwise, we can wait until lunchtime on Friday. I spent the afternoon with my dad so he could bring me up to speed and tell me some of the things I needed to know when I took the reins. At 5 o'clock, he got up and said, "Everything is all yours, Frank. I'll see you when your mother decides she's had enough, and I want to warn you that may not happen." He left, and I called my old office and asked Kathy to come up. Myrna had gone home at 5, so Kathy's arrival wouldn't cause any gossip, nor was there to be any. After all, I was in charge, and Kathy was one of the heads of my department. It made perfect sense for me to call those who reported to me into my office. Kathy walked in and asked, "Did you call the boss?" "Yes. There's something missing in this room, and I thought maybe a woman's perspective would clue me in. I already think I know, but I need a second opinion. A woman's opinion." She looked around and then said, "The color of the walls should be brighter." "That's it? That's all you can think of?" She shrugged, and I said, "I'm disappointed in you, Kathy. The first thought that should have crossed your mind is, I never lay down on that table." She smiled and started unbuttoning her blouse. When I got home, Jean looked out of sorts, and I figured it was because her lover was in the hospital and in pretty bad shape. She must have been thinking, if Pat could do that to Andy, what will she do to me? She said she wouldn't tell Frank, but she never said she wouldn't get back at me. I pretended I hadn't noticed anything. After dinner, I played with the kids, and we agreed to go to the amusement park the next day. When I got up, Jean was already in bed, and as I slid into bed with her, neither of us made an attempt to snuggle up to each other. The next day, Jean begged not to go to the amusement park with us, citing that she wasn't feeling well. The kids and I had a great time at the park, but when we got home, Jean wasn't there. She showed up about an hour later with a couple pizzas she picked up on the way home. "I just didn't feel like cooking today. I'm not feeling very well, so I'm going to go to bed." The next 5 days flew by, and Jean and I basically just lived in the same house. Neither of us made any attempt to talk to each other, other than saying, "What do you want for dinner? And don't forget to take out the trash." On Friday, when we had lunch with Alan, he slid one CD across the table to me. Nothing special. On Saturday, she visited him in the hospital. I don't have any video footage, but the audio from her purse shows her crying when she left. They mostly talked about how they didn't realize how bitter Andy's wife would be and wondered where she found the people who did the damage. The good news, at least I think you'd consider it good news, is that he told her that unless she could divorce you and get a big chunk of money, they wouldn't be able to carry out their plans. Andy doesn't seem to have his own health insurance. He was insured under his wife's policy where she works, and she dropped him from her policy when she filed for divorce. He is responsible for his medical bills, and they are significant and growing every day. There's video of her sitting at home crying, but other than that, there's nothing. Looks like they're out of luck because she's not getting any big chunk of money from me. In fact, tonight I'm going to tell her that the household budget will have to be cut by a third or she can give up the car. It will be her choice, but it has to be one or the other. I've already told her that my paycheck has been cut by a third because of the bad economy and that more cuts are coming. And how long are you going to keep this up? That's up to Jean. She could leave at any time and there's nothing I can do about it. The no-fault divorce laws in this state don't give me any leeway, but unless Jean jumps ship, I intend to hang on until the kids are old enough to live on their own, or old enough to choose which parent they want to live with if a divorce does happen. Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Good luck to you, buddy. Back at home, I asked Jean if she had talked to Pat, and she said she hadn't. Isn't that strange? I can't remember a day that you didn't talk. She must be really upset about what Andy did to her. I'm going to call her and see if I can't invite her over here so we can cheer her up. I don't think you should do that. Right now, I think she should be left alone. And don't forget I know her a lot better than you do. Good, if you say so. We have enough problems of our own right now. We're going to have to cut the household budget by a third until things get better at work. I don't see how to do that. Well, the choice is yours, but either cut back on family expenses or give up the car. The payment, license plates, and insurance make up about a third of the family budget. It's up to you to decide what you want to do. That's not fair. I need my car. Then cut the budget. We end up making a third less than we used to, and we'll have to live with it. I don't understand. Damn it, Jean. It's got to be done. Accept the fact that we're not going to live well anymore. Just do it. Stop arguing and pray the situation doesn't get worse. There's still a chance the company could shut down, and then we'd really be in deep shit. I left her sitting there and went down to the basement to work on a few things. An hour later, I came back upstairs and asked what we were having for dinner. I was hoping we could go out tonight. Jesus, woman. Are you out of your mind? I just finished telling you that we're in financial trouble and need to cut the budget. Get those words into your head, Jean. Budget, budget, budget. She ran out of the room crying and I smiled and got busy making dinner. When it was ready, I called the kids over to play, and while we ate, we talked about how their day at school had been. They asked where their mom was, and I told them that mom wasn't feeling well. Something is wrong with her and she is resting in her bedroom. After dinner, I played with them until bedtime and then headed to the bedroom. When I entered the room, Jean was already awake and looked up at me and said, "You didn't have to talk to me like that." No, I didn't. That dinner trash showed me that you don't take it seriously when I say we have less money now and we have to adjust to that and it goes back to the household budget or your car. Make your choice by Sunday night and let me know, or I'll make my choice on Monday. I slid under the covers, rolled over with my back to her, and fell asleep with a smile on my face. I had no doubt that she would choose the budget over the car, but I had a small hope that she wouldn't say anything to me until Sunday night and I'd be rid of her car on Monday. She was quiet at breakfast, so the conversation at the table was between me and the kids. I asked them what they wanted to do that day, and when they didn't say anything, I said, "How about going to the park?" Jean, thinking that by park I meant an amusement park, spoke up and said, "I thought we had to pay into the budget." That gave me the opportunity to throw another punch at her. The park is free, Jean. You don't have to pay to use the swings, slide, or jungle gym. I spent the afternoon at the park with the kids, and then we came home and I did yard work until dinner. Dinner went smoothly. The kids were tired, and Jean apparently had nothing to say. After dinner, I watched a little TV until I felt ready to go to bed. Jean was already there and asleep or pretending to be, which was fine with me. Sunday morning, I said I needed to go to the office and go through the books to see if there was any way to cut our expenses and stay competitive. An hour later, I was already drowning in Kathy, and she was pleading with me to do my best, and I was certainly trying. That night, Jean gave me the answer I was waiting for. She would keep her car and work on cutting the budget. She was calm toward me, and I guessed she wasn't thrilled that I had called her dead, and I accepted that. As long as she was calm towards me, she wouldn't try to do it, and I wouldn't have to make excuses why I couldn't or wouldn't do it. Monday morning, I went to the bank and opened a new account in my name only. We had direct deposit of paychecks at work, so I transferred the check deposit from our joint account to my new account and then arranged for 2/3 of the check deposit to be automatically transferred to Jean and I's joint account. In the afternoon, Kathy and I attended a meeting at the Hilton with representatives of Matheson Manufacturing, and after the meeting, we went upstairs and spent a very pleasant hour before returning to work. Just before I left work, I got a call from Alan. "I have something you need to hear right now. Can you stop by on your way home?" "I'm on my way. I'll see you in 10. When I arrived at his store, he led me into his office and told me to have a seat. Everything I have is from her purse device. She came to see him on Saturday and yesterday, but their conversations mostly consisted of him pressuring her for money and her telling him she couldn't do it because of your pay cut and the fact that you put her on a budget. Today, she saw him again, and the conversation took a different turn. You wouldn't believe it. He pushed some buttons on his desk, and from the speakers on the couch behind him, I heard, "We have another option. How much did he insure his life for?" "About $1 million. He has a $500,000 policy that he pays for and another $500,000 policy from work." "Is either of them double indemnity?" "I think both of them." "So in case of accidental death, you get $2 million? "I think about that." "So we need him to have a fatal accident." "And how do we do that?" "We'll have to think about it a bit, but I'm sure if we both think about it, we can come up with something." "I don't even know where to start." "Think about it, and something will come to mind. Maybe nothing viable, but maybe your idea will trigger something in my mind, or something you think of will work with something I think of." Alan turned it off and said, "I'll give you a copy so you can listen to the whole conversation later, but I felt like you needed to hear this part right now." I sat in silence for a while and then said, "This changes everything. The Russians had something the KGB called wet work, and right now I'd really like to know someone who could do that sort of thing." Alan stared at me for a few seconds, then picked up a pen, wrote something on a piece of paper, and held it out to me across the table. I read it and looked at him in surprise, and he stared back at me with no expression on his face. On the notepad was written, 20,000 each. I reached out, took the pen, scribbled each, and wrote Andy. Then I handed the notebook back to him and said, "Go." He smiled and said, "Consider it done." That night back home, I had a hard time acting normal around Jean. At dinner, the kids and I mostly talked about how the day had gone. After dinner, I helped them with their homework, then we watched their favorite DVD, The Lion King, and when it was over, it was time for them to go to bed. Jean was lying in bed waiting for me. There was a time when the sight would have made me rip off my clothes and pounce on her with rapture. But I just stared at her, lay down in bed, and slid under the covers. I rolled over onto my side with my back turned to her and closed my eyes. After about 5 minutes, she got off the bed, and after a couple more minutes, she got back into bed, climbed under the covers, and we fell asleep. I didn't sleep very well and got up early. I managed to get dressed and leave before Jean even woke up. I had breakfast at IHOP and then headed to the office. Around 10 o'clock, I called Pat and asked her to meet me for lunch. Over taco salad, I told her I was going to tell Jean what I knew about her and Andy. "I know you don't care about her anymore, but I thought I should let you know." "You're right. I don't care. But what about you trying to keep your kids?" "I think I can keep them. Jean likes her lifestyle too much to give it up, especially since Andy won't be able to do much for her. She could stay and be a mom, but that would mean separate bedrooms and pretending to be a faithful and loving wife in public. I think she'll settle for that. I have a cudgel I can use on her if she doesn't agree." "Oh? What's that?" "All the video and audio tapes of her and Andy that I have. She'll play my game or the whole world will see what a slut she really is. How's your divorce going? He's not fighting it, so the divorce should be final in about 3 months. I wished her well and went back to work. I called Jean and told her I had to work late and not to hold dinner for me, and after work I took Kathy out to dinner and we ended up going to her place for dessert. I got home at midnight and Jean was already asleep in bed. I got up again and was out of the house before Jean woke up. When I got home that night, Jean was all in tears, and I found out the reason for that the next morning when I got a call from Alan. I just wanted to let you know that I found out about the death of your wife's friend's husband yesterday afternoon. I was told that someone, probably one of the nurses, didn't let the air out of the needle when changing one of his IVs. The air bubble got into his heart and it just stopped beating. Some people have bad luck. You might want to let your wife know about this so she can call a friend and offer support. I will. Thanks for letting me know. When I got home that evening, Jean was not in a good mood at all. I got home half an hour later than usual, and when I walked in, she said, "Couldn't you have called me and warned me you were going to be late?" The tone of her voice was just what I needed to realize what I was about to do. You don't have to snap at me. I've had just about enough of you. After the kids go to bed, you and I are going to sit down and have a little talk to clear some things up. I stepped away from her to wash the dishes for dinner and left her standing there with a stunned expression on her face. 10 minutes after I put the kids to bed, I told her to meet me in the living room. When I walked in, she was sitting on the leather couch and I took a chair at the table. First of all, I know why you and Pat aren't talking, and I know who Andy was entertaining her with. I saw surprise and then anger flash across her face, and I was sure I'd gotten it right. Pat didn't snitch on you. She said she wouldn't tell me if you talked Andy out of resisting the divorce. She didn't tell me, I told her. And having said that, I pressed the play button on the VCR, and Jean saw for the first time the material I had been collecting. I let her watch for a few minutes, and then fast-forwarded to where they were talking about Pat's trust fund. It was seeing this that I told Pat about you and Andy, and showed her this footage. Why I sat on it and did nothing about it is none of your business. All that matters is that I have now decided to act. You have 3 choices and 3 choices only. 1, you pack up and leave and I file for divorce, with you getting nothing and me getting custody of the kids. The second one is you stay here and be a mother to the kids and a housekeeper for me. You'll move all your stuff into the guest bedroom. To friends and family, we will continue to appear as a loving couple, but there will be no, I repeat, no sexual contact between us. The third option is, you can say, "Screw you, Frank, I'm taking the kids, and I'm going to fight to get what I can out of you." If you go that route, I'll take this little snippet to the police. And I pressed the play button again, so she could listen to herself discussing my impending accidental death with her lover. It's called conspiracy to commit murder, and in this state you face up to 25 years in prison. While you're in jail, I'll divorce you, get custody of the kids, and they'll be grown and out before you ever see them again. It's your choice, and I need your answer before I leave for work in the morning. One last thing. Tomorrow, you're going to go to the hospital and tell Andy that when he's discharged, he better catch the first plane, train, or bus out of town because I'm coming to get him. If you care about him as much as you think you do, it might help you decide on the first or second option, because the third one will put him in a jail cell next to you. I can't. You can't what? Tell him. He died in the hospital. When? Late last night. Damn shame. I was looking forward to him going back to the hospital when he was discharged. You know what upset me the most? Not you goddamn Andy, although that really pissed me off, but the fact that when he suggested my death, you didn't say, "We can't do that," or "I won't be a part of anything like that." You just said yes. Get out of here and move to the guest room, and don't forget I want an answer by the time I leave for work in the morning. She got up and left, and I pulled the CD out of the turntable and put it in my briefcase, which I carried upstairs and into the bedroom. I slid the dresser in to block the door so I wouldn't be visited in the middle of the night while I was sleeping, and then I got into bed and fell soundly asleep. In the morning, I found Jean sitting in the kitchen with red eyes. I poured myself a cup of coffee and said, "How was it?" "What?" And what's your answer? You already know and don't pretend you don't know. I can't give up my kids and I don't want to go to jail. Good. We'll discuss the details when I get home tonight. Don't hold up dinner because I'll be working late. Keep one thing in mind. It should be obvious to you that I'm watching you. At the first sign, however slight, that you plan to take the kids and run away, I will bring the hammer down on you. Understood? Yes. I'd had a great day at work, and of course my staying late at work was a euphemism for spending time at Kathy's apartment. I got home around 9 and found Jean watching TV. I just looked at her, said kitchen, walked to my room and put my briefcase on the table. When I got to the kitchen, Jean was sitting at the table. I sat down across from her and said, "The rules are simple. You will continue to be the mother you've always been. You'll keep the house in order like you always have, and you'll act normal when I'm around the kids. When we go out or get together with friends and family, you'll play the role of attentive and loving wife. The excuse for our separate bedrooms will be that I snore so loudly you can't sleep. As for your life, I leave that up to you, but you will never bring another man into this house. Whatever you do, you must see to it that it doesn't become public and lead to my humiliation. This should not be a problem for you as you have had plenty of practice. You've managed to keep me and Pat in the dark for over 6 years. Follow these rules and nothing will change for you. You will still have credit cards, access to a checking account and a car. The only change is you will no longer have a loving husband, but that doesn't matter because you didn't need one anyway. Any questions? Just one. How long? Until the kids are 18 or on their own. And then what? Who knows? That's 10 years away, and a lot can change by then. You can also take the first option anytime you want. I'll even tone it down a bit. I'll give you $5,000 for every year you last, and if you last at least 5 years, I'll give you a new car to drive away in. That was 7 years ago, and things have worked out just fine. To all observers, Jean is a devoted wife and mother. She's had a few boyfriends, but she's kept them in the shadows, and I doubt any of our friends and family know about it. Except my parents, of course. I told them about her affair with Andy and my current relationship with her, but I never told them about how I talked her into agreeing to a relationship. Her current boyfriend is serious enough to put a private investigator on me, but how serious she is about him, I don't know, and I'm not going to ask. My father has announced that he will retire next year and turn the company over to me. When that happens, I can make some changes. Maybe release Jean and allow her to visit the house. Another option I'm leaning toward is a house on 5 acres with a guest cottage next to the 4-car garage. I could buy it, quietly divorce Jean, and let her live in the cottage so she could be close to the kids. I think Kathy would like that. She hasn't said anything yet, but I know she'd like a more permanent relationship, and for that matter, so would I. Well, we'll see in a year. The end. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.